To the August 11th Fincom meeting. I see we have everybody here, plus a few guests. I'll remind all the participants and anybody that calls in that if you join this meeting, you automatically consent to your likeness and audio being used to broadcast by LCTV. We have a light agenda tonight. First item is the reserve fund transfer from the landfill compliance. It's be presented by DPW Director Chris Stoddard. The next would be proposed lease purchase or ambulance buy with Fire Chief Wodzinski. We have a reserve fund transfer requested by the Finance Director. Then we'll get a financial update and a special town meeting timeline. We'll do board member updates, public input, and then we will adjourn. So moving right on to the first item, reserve fund transfer for landfill compliance. Chris, you want to bring it home?
Yeah, sure. So this is the contract that's the culmination of all the DEP meetings, the site visits, everything with sitting down with DEP and Time and Bond, putting everything together that we need for FY21 to bring us into full compliance at the landfill. It includes all the monitoring well. We needed to install a number of additional monitoring wells. So this includes all the drilling for that, all the sampling for the whole year, the reporting, and it has a little bit in case we do go over, we have high hits, then we have to resample and resubmit. So there's a little bit of money involved for that in case that has to happen. So this is everything we would need for FY21. Assuming once all the monitoring wells are installed, we get through a year, we're going to hopefully go back to DEP and ask if we can reduce the number of tests and monitoring samples we have to take for FY22. It will, no matter what, it'll be cheaper because we're not going to have to install additional wells in 2022. So we're hoping to save obviously some money there, but this is the cost for the first year.
This was put off from annual town meeting because we didn't have the exact cost at the time, right?
Correct.
Yeah, correct. We didn't until we had DEP basically give us their blessing on the monitoring plan. We couldn't come up with a budget yet.
Okay. Comments from the board? Everybody read all the information.
So were we just assuming then that we would be taking the reserve fund transfer right from the beginning in the budget? We knew we were going to have to have something. We didn't put anything in. I'm trying to understand this.
That was part of the strategy for upping the reserve fund budget, was that we knew that this was coming down the pike. I think when Chris and I had talked about it, I think we thought it would come in more like 50,000, somewhere around that range, but it ended up coming in much higher than we had anticipated. But that was this played into part of the reason why we were upping the reserve fund transfer budget.
Yeah, I remember thinking it was either 50 or 60, I think, that we had planned. But I guess the question is this like a, it is a pretty big variance. It's over double what we expected. So does EPA have a standard when these things happen? How many monitoring wells? Is there a standard, or are we just making, how did you come up with your numbers, Chris, on how many wells you thought we would have?
Well, we currently have a number of wells around the landfill, and the wells that were installed before were what DEP required back in the 80s when this landfill was capped. Unfortunately, the town kind of dropped the ball and didn't do the monitoring and the sampling and the reporting that they should have for the last 30 years. So DEP came back this time, and now that the town is having to test for PFAS, and we've found PFAS at the landfill, I believe DEP is using us to help them get more information about PFAS. So the requirement for additional monitoring wells, additional surface water sampling locations, I think they're going to use the information two ways. One, to get the landfill in compliance, but two, also try to identify their PFAS sources. or get at least more information for it. So we didn't, at the time of 50, 60,000, we honestly didn't think they were going to require us to punch in 4 more wells and have 10 more surface water sampling sites.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Anything else, Chris?
No, that's it.
Okay, do I have a motion?
So is this considered water department or is this town? I know it's kind of the same, but
No, all these, yeah, these are coming from the solid waste.
okay, so this is about the transfer station or about the landfill. It's not about the water.
Correct. Yeah, it's 100%. Yeah, it's all about the landfill.
Okay.
I'll make a motion. What was the number, Cheryl, that we're?
It was
118,000.
Okay. Make a motion for a reserve fund transfer of 118,000 to meet the requirement of the EPA's request for extra drilling wells and water analyzing holes, or whatever. What are they called?
Groundwater monitoring wells.
Groundwater monitoring wells. Thank you.
And sampling and monitoring throughout the year.
All right. Thank you. As mentioned.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, we'll do a roll call. This time I will not forget you, Betsy. Betsy?
Betsy's yes.
Gary?
Gary's yes.
Alan Bell?
On Bell's a yes.
Greg?
Greg's a yes.
Tyler?
Tyler's a yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Alan is yes. We are unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Chris. All right, next issue is the proposed lease purchase or some method of buying a new ambulance. Scott Wodzinski, Chief of Fire.
He's muted.
Scott?
Unmute that. That's better. Good evening. So we've been, I'm putting in the request to utilize the funds that were voted at the Springtown meeting to entertain the lease purchase of a new ambulance. I'm going to go into the screen share and I'll try to skim through the slides and, save the data for you guys. I'll skim through, just somebody if you have any questions, and I'll try to get to the numbers as quick as I can. I think I'm on the right one here. So currently we have 2 ambulances. They're both, one's a 2012, one's a 2013. Back when we obtained these ambulances, they roughly did just under 700 medicals a year. Now we do just under 1,200 medicals a year. It's steadily growing. So the wear and tear on these vehicles it compounds, and very frequently both of these vehicles are out simultaneously, back-to-back medicals. The other issue that we're dealing with is that them being 8 and 9 years old, that wear and tear. Last year, the ambulances were out of service combined just over 2 months of time. So in that time, we brought in mutual aid ambulances. Last year, we brought in 42 mutual aid ambulances, the year before 66. So that's potential lost revenue. By what I'm proposing is to go for a third ambulance and keep our oldest for a few more years and put that in reserve. It would basically be kept as a BLS ambulance, basic life support, with existing equipment that we have. And then we would use our ALS equipment on the 2 newest ambulances. If one of them were to go out of service, we'd be able to basically, make that backup ambulance, an ALS ambulance within 15, 20 minutes. So that, we could maintain that service for the community. When we look back at our revenues in FY19, you can see month to month the revenues in July, right when we started, that the 23,000 and change goes through the whole year. We brought in a total of 529,000 with the $44,085 per month average. Last year we had a great year. We were well established. The billing had kicked in full speed, and we were bringing in an average of 61,618 a month for the grand total of the 739,423. That allowed us to meet our $650,000 offset and carry a little bit over. So in talking with our billing company, we were at an 85% collection rate, just for the info. So what we have here is, I'm going to show the 3 models. The low funding on that would basically be like a catastrophic failure of the insurance system, real bad COVID, between insurance companies closing, significant delays, and things of that nature, where it would really limit our funding. And we would be able to just make our offset, and we may not potentially make our finance payment for going with a lease. One thing that we do have in benefit right now is that additional 100 and change that we were able to carry over, that we'd be able to put towards that. That's all. I apologize. That's also taken account that 100 that was allocated at Springtown meeting, being put down as a deposit on it. Then there's the midline projection, which is basically between our first year and our second year. We meet everything. We make offset. We make our ambulance payment, and we basically call it even. There'd be a little bit left over. And then when you go into our high projection, which is last year's model, we would be able to make our payment, potentially pay the ambulance off early, and we would still have money left over for ALS equipment in the future, or potentially down payment of another ambulance going forward, depending on each year as it goes forward. This here is just some of the graphs, just kind of showing our all 3 models. The gray is the high projection, the orange is the medium, and the blue is the low. As you can see, it doesn't make our payment if, like I said, if we had a significant failure of revenues. This is the lease option that we had. It was 2.77% over the life of the lease. I'm sorry, that's for the 3-year. For the 4-year, it was 2.79. It is on state bid. There's no prepayment penalties. We could potentially pay it off after the first year or the second year, depending on how each year goes. It also does include some additional equipment that is mandated now from OEMS. It's basically a loading system with a new stretcher.
John, can I interrupt for a second? You keep talking about paying it off. Is this that you own it at the end of the lease, or you give it back at the end of the lease?
No, it's kind of a lease purchase. So it's a single payment per year, and then we own it at the end of the 4 years. The other option that Cheryl and Steve were looking at the other day is actually borrowing and banding. I'm going to let Cheryl talk about that so I don't butcher it.
Okay. All right. Sorry for the interruption. Thank you.
Hey, Scott, I've got a quick question. The revenue slide that you showed, thank you. Are those collected monies or are those billed monies?
I'm sorry, that's collected money.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, those are actual dollars.
Perfect. So there's another 100 grand out there that could be collected?
It's already been collected.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Yeah, the revenue in the bottom in the red. So for FY19, that was our total. For FY20, the 739,423, that's our total collected for FY20.
And that represents 85% of what was billed?
That's correct. So without getting really into it, each different insurance company or each different payer, they have contractual rates. They're all different. One of the effects that we're feeling right now, some of our revenues are down at roughly 43 and change. When we look back at COVID, April and May, it was like a ghost town. We did not have a single car crash for a month. 495 was empty. Car crashes, I mean, we're back to normal now, unfortunately, for the folks that are out there. We go to car crashes every day. The auto insurance is the highest paying insurance that we collect. So having a whole month with none of that, we're actually feeling that effect now. So July probably, as well as August, we're anticipating low. The other thing that it was in effect was the delay of the billing company. They went through a time period where they were all working from home. There were delays at collections. So, come September, October, we may see an increase or a significant spike where those delayed revenues are all finally coming in. Sometimes those revenues are off by 2-3 months. By time people actually sign their paperwork, get it back to their insurance company, the insurance company makes that payoff. So we ride that little roller coaster and move along. Similar to town hall, when people aren't paying their taxes for no good reason, this is sometimes similar as well. And we feel that little delay, and then it comes in down the road.
Got it. Thank you.
Hey, Chief, I'll follow up on that. Are we doing anything with the collection agency to try to tighten up that number to get it closer to 100? Are they doing anything or proposing to do anything?
So we do. The average high for all of the area is 92. You'll never get 100%. So we're actually not too far off. We do work with the billing company. We try to improve our reporting, improve our signatures, basically improve all of our data collection so that when it goes to the insurance company, we try to make it so that it's as rapid as possible. When there's a delay of information, that's what kind of slows that process down.
So it sounds like you're working on it.
Always working on it.
It's a work in progress. Now, it sounds like there's a lot of revenue there that's being missed. And yeah, obviously you're not going to collect 100%, but if you could move that needle by 7 points, that's a decent chunk of change.
Yeah, is most of that unclaimed money, is it money that's we're not getting reimbursed from insurance for some reason, or is it from actual end customers and they don't owe a copay or co-insurance? Or do we not know that from billing? It's
a variety of reasons, depending on, kind of contractual rates, what the payers are. We know Medicare only pays a fraction of what's actually billed. but it's definitely a variety of things. The other thing, if there's a delay of information, sometimes, for certain medical incidents, there's only so much money in the pot. And if there's a significant delay at getting the information out there, the hospital will get the chunk. And so on some occasions, there's no money left to pay. So you get, a smaller amount.
Scott, I have a question, if I may. Something's about the numbers just aren't working for me. I understand the lease part. I don't understand the lease to own part. What would be an advantage of that over just financing an ambulance to own?
So Cheryl was just about to talk about that. It's really, similar to what Cheryl's going to talk about with the banding. It spreads out the payment so that we can pay for it out of our ambulance collections instead of a big one lump sum out of, from the taxpayer.
Okay, so I think that might make more sense to me anyways, if we made a commitment for the extra revenue from the ambulances to continue to go into this fund. That would make more sense. Otherwise, we're going to be at the same situation, 5 years, whenever we have to replace the next ambulance in a couple of years, right?
Actually, if you look at it and you base it off of the revenues on last year, or even somewhere in the midline, by the time this ambulance is paid off with these revenues, we would actually have additional cash to put down potentially for a new ambulance without going to the town for $100,000 to put down.
Yeah.
Cheryl, do you want to elaborate on that, on the borrowing?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Scott. So one of the things that we did talk about and I discussed with Steve and brought up to the chief was that we actually get much better rates if we do the borrowing ourselves. And it's an option within the ambulance to do short-term bans, and you just roll them year over year. And so in that instance, it works the same way as the lease to purchase that the chief has mentioned. It's just us borrowing the money, the ambulance fund paying the payments against the borrowing that we take out.
What's the interest rate that the town can get now?
So we can get as low, I think the most recent one Steve said was 1.5%, and he hasn't seen them go above 2% in years. So, in the grand scheme of things, it would probably save about $9,000 to $10,000 in interest if we just ban it. The other benefit if we do the ban is that it gives us more flexibility. The first 3 years of a ban, we only have to pay the interest. So if, like the chief mentioned, they end up in a year where COVID really affects their collections, they can just make the interest payment. It's not like a lease where the payments are the payments. And then after year 3, we're only obligated to pay 10% of the principal. So it just gives us a little bit more flexibility so that if we do end up in a situation where the ambulance fund isn't generating the revenues that the chief anticipates, we're not having to look to the town to make those payments.
It seems like a no-brainer to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
I think I'm still curious on the fact we're not purchasing it outright and financing it.
So that is
I can't get myself past.
That's what we would effectively be doing. We'd be purchasing the ambulance and putting banning or bonding. I mean, ban is a short-term bond, but
Right.
we would be taking out the debt and purchasing it outright.
Okay, so historically, I just want to get a historical perspective. Historically, we have waited for the town to buy this in one chunk. We would say we're going to spend $250,000, $350,000 in any given year, buy it, capital, boom, pay it, done. We haven't historically financed ambulances, correct? But the prices have gotten up now where it's making a little more sense. Is that kind of where we're at? I mean, you're right. When they were 200,000, the town could kind of swallow it in one chunk. But I think we're talking 350. I mean,
We're talking $400,000.
Yeah.
$400,000 for a vehicle that's already 3 years behind it being replaced.
Yeah.
Vehicles that are bringing in over $700,000 a year of revenue. And like I said, last year, an ambulance was out of service for over 2 months.
Right.
We're already kind of behind the 8 ball at this. It's 6 to 8 months once it's ordered for one to actually come in. So we're trying to be creative and use our revenue to go ahead and try to finance this so that we could try to get it a little sooner instead of waiting for next year at Springtown meeting, maybe getting another 100, maybe getting 200, maybe having to wait an additional year. And now our ambulances will be over 10 years when they were being replaced almost on an every 5-year cycle, and ambulances were being kept for 10 years. So now by having a third, our goal would be to try to keep them for roughly 15 years. So when they're realistically 12 to 15, it would be rotated out. It's all going to depend on the wear and tear of the vehicle and the run volume as it continues to increase.
Okay.
But right now we're trying to be creative so that we didn't have to go back to the taxpayer to, put that money all in that one lump, and to try to use the small chunks of revenue above and beyond our offsets so that we could, try to purchase this a little sooner and create a program so that we could do it on a steady basis.
Yeah. Well, I know historically, I'm trying to think when we should have done this, I think a few years ago. We've kicked this ball down because it's a capital item, and it seems to be that vehicles are the ones that suffer usually when capital, the first one's cut, so to speak. So, which I think is why we created a vehicle stabilization fund, Cheryl, to get ahead of this. But
we'd like to create one. I'm having a little pushback from the treasurer, so I would say I think we have to wait on that until we have a new treasurer, and then go to town meeting with that. But
so, but are we going to keep the stabilization for the ambulance fund open?
So the ambulance was the way it was voted is as a capital article. So it's a capital article for an ambulance, just like anything else. So next year, if you choose to vote another 100,000 for ambulance, it would be segregated ambulance, another 100,000.
Now, would we be able to keep money filtering into this from the receipts from the the vehicle runs that they're doing? Is that something we can continue to put into this fund? Or we have to create something different, a different mechanism?
So, it's a little bit different mechanism. So the capital article is the capital article, and that sits by itself. And then the ambulance revenues are segregated into their own the ambulance fund completely. And so the revenues will keep going to that ambulance fund. It'll keep building up that balance and be available to use to pay payments or down payments or whatever it might be. It always stays segregated in that ambulance fund.
There will always be that $650,000 offset that comes out of that account to offset our budget.
Yeah.
So anything beyond that is what is available for this.
Yeah, I was just thinking that I think your biggest ticket items are your vehicles.
Yep.
Keeping ALS and things like that on the capital side makes sense because they're high priority items, and you'll never see those getting cut from a capital plan. But I think that's why I wanted to make sure that this money kept going into the vehicles, because this will continuously be your biggest draw from capital, right?
And that's why we wanted to try to establish something like this so that we could, anything above and beyond that 650 would go towards, dedicated towards ambulance.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
That's all I have.
Anyone else have any further questions?
So is it the recommendation here that we go and ban this versus leasing it? And by banning it, just so I'm clear, we're actually financing it and not leasing it, right?
Right, we're borrowing for it. We're buying it outright and borrowing for the
To pay,
project.
make the payment, yeah.
Right.
That makes sense.
Just on
You pitched this, yeah, you pitched this last night to the
Yep.
Board of Selectmen. What did they have to say about it? Yes, no, maybe?
They
Sounds
voted
like
to
a good
bring it
idea.
forward. They voted to bring it forward to fall town meeting.
Okay,
With the bands as opposed to the lease?
I honestly, I think that will probably be brought up at the next meeting to talk about more.
Okay.
But they did hear both options. And it sounded like the banding made more sense to them.
Right.
And hopefully they would give FinCom recommendation when they get to that level of discussion of this decision.
Right.
So are these structured as general obligation or as revenue?
General obligation.
Scott, I guess the last question is, you're adding an ambulance, so you'll have a fleet of 3.
Yes.
Is this the expectation to have all 3 of these vehicles could potentially be on the road at once? We don't have the personnel for that. Is personnel going to be following down the road? Is that going to be a request? I know
Personnel is always an issue.
Yeah.
The call department right now, honestly, it's very difficult. We don't really get members back at all. So it's duty shift. On occasion, we'll get 1 or 2 guys that come back. So it's a reality.
Okay.
that's not really the answer to the question.
Yeah. The
The
answer is
question
yes.
is, right
answer
now,
is
you're
yes.
running 2 ambulances with the personnel to do that. If you get a 3rd ambulance,
Yep.
will you then say, hey, we can run 3 ambulances, but I need 2 more EMTs and 1 ALS guy?
We can actually run off, if we had to, we could run all 3 ambulances today. And the deputy and myself would be on that 3rd ambulance,
Yes, I'm sure you would.
whatever it takes.
I think Gary sniffed it out. There's going to be a request coming for more bodies.
Well, I think
There was last year and that.
right. I just think that it does give room for growth here, personnel, especially if there's a revenue offset within this new vehicle. Having 3 doing the runs, if it makes sense, keep pushing those numbers and see, what that looks like.
That I can that 650 offset, we've maxed that out on personnel. That well is dry.
Yeah.
So, if anything above and beyond that we can, dedicate to an ambulance, that would be, make the most sense. Personnel, there's no way that we could hire additional personnel out of that revenue. Not unless there's a significant uptick in calls. If you want to go run through traffic on 495, I'm sure that would generate some.
But Scott, is the intention though to have 3 that are ready to go at any time, or is it really have 2 and one's there when one of the other ones is out of service? What are you really going after at this point?
A backup, a reserve vehicle, so that when the other ambulances are out of service, it will be there to take its place. That's the main objective to this.
So today or tomorrow, if you had this new one, you have 3 there, and you get that call in for a 3rd one, would you pull it out and have somebody go out in it, or would that go to mutual aid?
If we have staff to take it out, we'll absolutely take it out.
Won't the new
If
one
we
go
have the
out?
staff,
Wouldn't the
Sorry?
new one go out? Wouldn't that be in the A team, the new one, and you put one of the other ones in reserve? Is that?
yes, the new one would be the first one out. The oldest vehicle would be the reserve vehicle. But if there were 3 medicals and we actually had the staff on duty, or even if a couple call members came back, there's no reason why we would not run a 3rd ambulance out.
So it's sitting there and it's ready to go at any time. That was really my question. as opposed
Yes,
to kind
that's
of in
correct.
reserve someplace.
That's correct.
And these are two of these are ALS vehicles and one's a BLS?
That's correct. Yes.
Would it be possible to, though, also if we had 3 vehicles, to possibly respond to more mutual aid requests and also generate more revenue too?
Right now, we respond mutual aid whenever anybody calls us. We don't, unless there's a vehicle that's not available. If we're not available and we're all tied up on different incidents, then we won't respond to mutual aid.
We get revenue for those trips, right?
That's correct.
Right. Okay.
Okay, do we have a preference, guys? Do we think this is a good idea, a bad idea?
I can't. There's three things that I'll say. One more thing. There's three things I don't like leases. I don't, even in my own life, I think it's just, to me, it's bad business. If we were I will say a blighted community and we were desperate, I would definitely go. I can see why a community would be enticed to do a lease out of having to do it. Number one would always be purchase the vehicle outright. But I also recognize over the last 3 years, whether political or whatever, it keeps getting cut. And that's why we tried to create a stabilization so we could at least get ahead of this. So the vehicles wouldn't be 20 years old before we got it. But this, I think right now looks like it may be a way to bridge, sure. I would love to be able just to buy the vehicle outright. I think, the town could do it. We probably could have done it this year if we hadn't got hit the way we did. But this is probably the next best thing. That's my recommendation. My vote would be to, just finance it as opposed to leasing it.
Yeah. I'd like to kind of pile on top of that, and I'll ask this question to the chief. Is this a must requirement right now that we've got to replace one or add another ambulance? Or is this something that because we've got a little money in our wallet, we want to spend it?
I wouldn't call that money in my wallet. We're still $300,000 short. So I have an ambulance that's been sitting out of service for 2 weeks, and we're trying to determine if the turbo is gone on that. So that would be a major repair. Like I said, I had 2 months last year, a little over 2 months, where an ambulance was out of service, where we lost 42 mutual aid calls to mutual aid ambulances to other communities. Potential lost revenue. This is about keeping our fleet. This is the majority of what we do, is provide, an ambulance service to the residents of this community. These are the most relied upon vehicles within our department. They transport people every day. It's something that, again, it should have been replaced a few years ago. And it's a critical thing.
Just and looking at the monthly revenue, I mean, it seems like, depending on the month, over the course of the lease or the banding, I mean, all we need to lose is 3-4 months worth of revenue, and you really have already paid for it, right? So I mean, I think, it's probably a likelihood that with only 2, we're going to lose that revenue or more than we would have paid for this up front.
I mean, with the revenues that come in, I painted all 3 pictures for you. Even our first year, that was the lowest that we experienced. We only received a fraction. Our first 3 months, we still averaged out on 43. That was a difficult year with partial revenues. So I would anticipate it would continue to, be able to make all of our payments.
Cheryl, do we not ever banned other vehicles? I mean, we banned it. It seems like we've not just fire, but in general, it seems like we buy these vehicles outright across the board for DPW, police, and fire. So is this unprecedented, what we're talking about?
I think, yeah, as far as recent years, absolutely. I mean, I think maybe way back when the town was in different circumstances. But the other difference here is that in this instance, there's a separate revenue source that's paying the debt.
We've never had that in the past.
Right. So a highway vehicle doesn't, if we're replacing a dump truck, highway doesn't have their own way to be generating revenue to pay payments on debt. And so I think that's one of the differentiating factors too, as well.
Yeah, this is the first time we've done anything like this in my tenure on this board. But that's a good reason why, because the fire department has a revenue stream to pay for it, where others, police and DPW, do not. So it makes sense to me. So I guess the question for us is, one, are we agreed that we need to buy a third ambulance? And if so, what's our preference, lease or finance?
I think the second question is the easy question. It seems to me like it's a no-brainer that this should be banned. Under a ban, we should finance it and do it that way. I do have one other question. Sorry to barrage you with questions, Chief. Do you know, compared to other towns near us, how long are they getting out of their ambulances? Are we in the same boat, or are we kind of behind, or where do we rank with them? Have you looked at that at all?
5 years. 5 years is so every 5 years they're trying to rotate. I know Air, Groton, Acton, Westford. So roughly 10 years life out of a vehicle. Concord's gone to 3 ambulances now. Actually, Westford's gone to 3 ambulances now. So they're trying to keep them for the 12 to 15 years as well.
Are they seeing the same kind of mileage that we're seeing in the 100,000 range or more? 150?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that makes sense then.
The ambulances run. They don't stop running.
Yeah, no, I get it. I mean, this seems like we always talk about ambulances, at least as long as I've been around here. And I think that from the revenue perspective, meaning that we've got revenue to offset things, we should be looking at doing this and financing it versus leasing it. So
if in regards to the presentation, it was initially, the lease option. The banding just kind of came up yesterday morning. Right. And that, so that to me, yes, that's the better option. Absolutely. Hands down. It offers a bit more wiggle room, and it's the best option for the town. But when I originally did the presentation, it was the leasing option. But hey, when better things come forward, why not?
Well, I think the best option.
Gift that keeps on giving, right?
The best option to me is to save money and purchase the vehicle outright. That's the best option. But I understand that that's probably not something that's going to happen. I get it.
Yeah, but I think if we're borrowing at 1.5%, I mean, it's not a lot of money. It's not a lot of interest. I'm with you, Gary. I don't like spending money on interest either. I'd rather earn it than spend it. But, if we need this, and we're looking at borrowing it for that low amount, that just seems to make the most sense. And it's being funded by receipts from what the ambulances collect. So it's almost its own little revolving account over there, taking care of business.
And I don't want to beat it to death, but Greg, that's where I was going with it, saying if we've got receipts from ambulance that are building, wait till we have the money to buy it outright. But it sounds like we have an aging fleet right now. At least this will bridge a gap, maybe to get us to a point where we can buy them outright. I don't know, but so that's all
I understand what you're saying, Gary. The issue with that is the potential for waiting. We could be waiting another 3 to 4 years.
I know.
To actually get to that point, and by then, our oldest ambulance would be 14 years old, and
I got it.
Behind the 8 ball.
Every time you cannot put both those ambulances on the road, we lose revenue. So
yep.
Okay.
There's a good reason right there to do it. Cheryl.
I'm sorry. I just want to add that we keep talking about the revenues, but there's also the potential, personal impact for somebody too, because they have to wait an extra 5 minutes for an ambulance to come from another town. Taxes are high here. So there's also the personal aspect of this as well.
Yep.
Right.
Point, Betsy.
Yeah, we don't need to do anything other than recommend or,
Yeah, yeah, as long as you recommend. I mean, ultimately, this is going to be either way, even if it was a lease, which it doesn't sound like that's the way we're going to go anyway. It's a special town meeting warrant article, so you'll be recommending and voting on the actual article.
Yeah. All right, so we've heard all the information, so now we'll just wait. When we get all the articles together for special town meeting, we'll go over this again for a final time and make a recommendation. All right, thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, can I just say one more thing? Is there any benefit to us making our recommendation to the Board of Selectmen that we would prefer the bands versus the lease?
I don't think it would hurt
I
if
think
you,
so.
voted your support for that option.
Yeah.
I don't think it would hurt.
Unless somebody's crazy about the lease. I haven't heard anyone say that though.
No, I think the sense of that I get is that, if we're going to do this, it should be the finance option as opposed to the lease. Anyone disagree with that? The answer is no. That's our recommendation from that side.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You
Thanks,
too.
Steve.
Thanks, Chief.
Moving right along, we have another reserve fund transfer requested by the finance director. Cheryl, you're up.
All right, thank you, Alan. So this is a reserve fund transfer request for the outside services that we had to bring in when the assistant town accountant was unexpectedly out during year end for about 3 weeks. This is one of the most pivotal times, especially for the assistant town accountant, as we have obligations and dates we have to meet for paying our bills. And given I am currently the only backup for the assistant town accountant, with me doing my own year-end stuff, I needed to bring in additional help. And so we brought Clifton Larson Allen in a couple days a week for the 3 weeks just to assist me to get through that process. And so my request is for $9,037.88, which is their bill for those services.
What if we say no?
Then I will have to ask for a budget amendment at special town meeting.
Any comment? Question? Okay, we have a request for $9,037.88 for a reserve fund transfer for the finance department. Roll call vote. Betsy?
That's a yes.
Gary?
Gary, yes.
Excuse me. Did I have a second? I did have a second, didn't I?
Second.
Yeah, okay. Alan Bell?
Alan Bell's a yes.
Greg?
Greg's a yes.
Tyler?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Alan? Yes.
Thank you.
It is approved.
How much do we have left, Cheryl?
You have $184,856.
Jeez. Spent half of it already. We're only a month into the new year.
Yeah, 11 months left.
It's bad.
You're right on
Still-
top of it, aren't you, Cheryl?
Still more than last year.
Yeah, your reserve fund.
More unknowns this year. I'm concerned, actually. We have more unknowns this year.
Yep.
Yeah, there will be. There's no doubt about that. Okay, Cheryl, we're ready for your financial update
Okay.
on the special town meeting timeline.
Great. So I just wanted to give an update on where we are so far in FY21. We're 1 month in. So far, our expenses are tracking a little under 2% less than they were for FY20. So we're expended about $400,000 less this year than we had compared to last year. For revenues, there's some positives and some negatives. Personal property is up about $27,000 over last year. Building permit fees is up about 10,000 over last year. Our real estate tax collections are down fairly significantly over last year. They're down a little over 400,000. 27% of that is commercial, 73% is residential.
Can I interrupt there?
Sure.
Are some of that, because the state allowed people to pay late as part of the COVID stuff for a while, is that partly what's impacting this?
No,
No, not at all?
no.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Yeah. We got some news at the state level for Chapter 70 and general municipal aid. They're going to level fund. That's the only news we've gotten, though we don't know how they're going to fund school choice or any of the other state aid buckets that we do get. We also do not know at this point what our assessments will be.
It's actually a victory, though. Level
It
funded.
is.
I didn't expect level funded, did you?
I mean, from that perspective, it is a big victory. So just to give you a sense of kind of what we had projected for those two buckets for state aid and where they're coming in. So Chapter 70 is coming in about 63,000 over our projection that we had. And general municipal aid is coming in about 245,000 over the budget projection that we used for the budget cuts. So when you compare the revenues and the expenditures, revenues overall are down about 410,000. Expenditures are down about 400,000, so they're pretty much offsetting them and about even. Any questions about the first month of the new fiscal year?
No, not from me. Anybody else?
Yeah.
It's a hard snapshot. One month is such a small.
It
Yeah.
is.
Let's
Certainly
talk in
is.
October.
Yeah.
You know.
And I
No.
mean, I put this in my email to you as well. You know, one of the big other buckets that we had anticipated being hit was our, meals tax and hotel tax.
Yeah.
And we won't know that until September 30th, what that is for that first quarter of this new fiscal year. But I looked at our last quarter payment, which embodies March through May, which was effectively when we were shut down completely. And so just high level and looking at those numbers, if I said, all right, that's what we're going to receive throughout FY21, which is extremely conservative because the economy's opened back up. I think that we were pretty spot on in our projection on meals tax. The one was hotel tax. That was a very significant hit. So, again, that's about all I can really tell you at this point is that I think on meals tax, the projection that we put forth was spot on. And hotel tax, we might have been a little bit off, but I really won't know that until the beginning of October.
Cheryl, have you gotten any sense from the school side on what there's happening with the budget for this year? What they anticipate?
No, so I haven't heard anything from them on anything they anticipate as far as needs. They've received some, they've gotten 2 grants already. They got over $300,000 in funding for COVID and, additional expenditure needs. And then they got a smaller one, which was, I think, around 40 or 50,000 recently as well, too. And it's all for the same things, just added expenses to, teach and reopen and whatnot. But I have not heard anything from them on any needs from the town.
Yeah, I suspect we will before it's over. How about the town on COVID-19? You put a lot of expenditures into the federal government for the CARES program or what?
Yes. Yeah. And so that's the other thing I want to say on the school side is that anything that is even kind of remotely COVID related for the schools, if it's not covered with their funding that they've received directly, it can be covered under our CARES funding as well, too. So we got an initial allotment of $900,000 from CARES. We submitted an initial request for a little under $200,000, and that was for known 20 expenses and expected. And so pretty much any expenditure that has anything related to COVID that we're expending is being covered either through CARES or FEMA.
So up until a level of 900,000, right?
Yes, yep.
So we can expect that any expenditures we've made for COVID-19 related issues, we're going to get reimbursed up to that level. Good. Okay.
And then on top of that, we have FEMA reimbursement too coming in.
All right. Well, good.
So, I mean, I think
Love
that's
those revenue streams.
yeah, I think that's what's really driving the fact that we're so under expended so far for this year is that really, I mean, we've been under a budget freeze, and anything we're expending is mainly COVID. I mean, we have obviously obligations for retirement and, you know, health insurance, but any of the departmental spend is mainly COVID related items, and that's being covered by our federal funding.
I know our board's concern, you know, in March, April was we can't count on that money. So it's nice to hear here we are in August and it's there.
Yeah.
Because we didn't know if it would be. We had no idea.
Right.
So.
Right.
They are so they started out fairly restrictive on CARES, and they've slowly kind of loosened up some of their guidelines on what we can and can't spend it on, which has been nice. So things that they initially had said no to me for, they came out and loosened those guidelines. And so I'm hoping that will continue through the fall as well too.
Another issue, we have a number of empty spots in employment. Steve is going to be leaving. Ann's going to be leaving. You've lost a person. There's we were going to hire somebody to replace Ann, and then an assistant for that person. Is that all still in the works? And how are we going to? I assume everybody's leaving and they're going to take the rest of their salary with them to pay out for vacation and sick pay. So we're going to be looking at, when we replace a body, we're going to have to replace at least half a year or 3/4 of a year worth of salary.
So
what have we got planned for that?
Sure. So with the individual that left in the HR office, it was a minimal, she wasn't a full-time, she was benefit eligible, but not full-time. So her payout was not anything of significance. Ann and Steve, we built into the budget their vacation payouts because we knew they were going to be quite large. The individual, we've lost 2 individuals in the assessing office. And I don't know what those payouts are going to be, but, you know, I am hoping that potentially, at least for the interim, we'll be able to offset that with a little bit of weeks of vacancy. But, you know, that remains to be seen once we process that final payroll.
Okay.
How about, is the contract buyout, has that been negotiated, and is that significant? Is that something else we need to account for?
Yes, I believe the select board will be coming to you with a request for that. I have not seen the terms, so I don't know what they are.
Well, for next budget year, maybe about 500,000 for the finance.
We laugh. That's no joke.
No, it's not.
All right. Any other questions for Cheryl?
Just on an accounting standpoint, so those vacation accrual, you have to pay it out now. That's not accrued for someplace as you go along?
Well, no, it is. It's accrued, so we get it monthly. But they're allowed to carry like 4 or 5 weeks of vacation over, so people
But it's not a budget hit per se. It's a cash hit, right? It shouldn't be a budget hit for.
Well, if we don't, it's so like so Steve and Ann, we knew, so we budgeted for their vacation buyouts. Others who have left that we didn't know, they didn't necessarily budget for their vacation buyout because they didn't realize they were going to leave.
It just, I don't know. I'm used to corporate accounting and I would accrue for those vacation expenses every month. And so when somebody takes it, it's a cash flow thing. It's not a P&L flow thing.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
Betsy,
but
they're not taking it, right? We're cashing them out.
I understand, but I don't understand why it comes out of the budget. It seems like it's on a balance sheet account someplace and it comes out. No, it doesn't work that way.
We're cash basis. We're
Okay.
modified
All
cash
right,
basis.
that answers it. Never mind. I'm always learning on that stuff.
It's, yeah, totally different world.
It doesn't make any, that part of it doesn't make any sense to me at all.
Yeah.
Because what if you just didn't have it? I mean, what, you know? Anyway.
Oh, well. Cheryl, thank you.
You're welcome. you want-
Timeline
Yeah.
for the town meeting.
So the special town meeting has been set for Saturday, October 17th at 9 a.m. with a rain date of, oh, sorry, did I say October? October 17th with a rain date of October 18th at 9 a.m. at Alumni Field outside. The select board will be meeting on August 24th and September 8th to continue to review insertion of articles. The warrant closes at noon on September 10th. And the warrant will be posted on September 22nd.
Cheryl, do you have a feel for how many articles are floating around out there at this point? Is there a lot of them?
So yeah, I was just gonna say, I can go over the preliminary ones right now. Right now, it looks like there's 12 articles. The standard bill of a prior year, budget amendments, supplemental capital, application. I'm sorry?
What's in the supplemental capital? Who's looking for money?
And so I believe that item specifically is related to Chris Stoddard. I don't know if he brought this in front of finance committee or just select board at one point, but he had floated the idea when we were talking about the increasing costs for waste management of actually purchasing a truck and doing it ourselves. And so, and he had kind of gone through the analysis on, in 3 years, it pays for itself effectively. So he's looking to use the leftover from the snow and ice to purchase that truck.
Not anything we've heard. Not as a board. I haven't heard anything about it at all.
Okay.
Proposed articles. What is the Littleton Station zoning change? Oh, that's the train station, right?
Oh, I think that's down where Old Very Fine used to be, Littleton Station, right?
Yeah, I don't know.
Don't know.
Okay. Just wondered.
I read that as the train station stuff
Did you?
too, Alan, but I don't know. That's what I assumed when I read it.
Yeah, I assumed it too, but I wasn't sure. All right.
Well, actually,
What's the last date that the selectmen are meeting on the warrant when it closes?
It closes at noon on Thursday, September 10th.
Okay. All right. Good enough. Any other questions for Cheryl? Anything else, Cheryl?
should Chris ban his truck instead of buying it outright at 1.5%?
Stop it.
Well, maybe Steve could invest that money and make more than 1.5% on it.
We're going to take up a collection. It'd be a finance committee.
But honestly, the thing is with the fall towns meeting, and this is what always happens, right? He's there, and so of course he's talking about using some snow and ice money, so I guess that's okay because it's kind of in the same department. But in general, that's where the problems arise, because now somebody comes out of the blue and says, well, this is our priority, we've got some money, we're going to spend it on this, as opposed to, well, what else should we be looking at, and is that the highest priority thing we're going to spend capital on?
And we haven't talked about things we were really serious about earlier this year about personnel, right? We talked
Right.
about all these positions that we had to cut because of COVID. And we said we'd push it off and see how the fall looked. Well, the fall town meeting is here, and it doesn't. I haven't seen anything in any discussion of new personnel. With all I've heard of is replacing old personnel. So
That's about the
that's off
best
the
we're gonna
table.
be able to do.
So, just to answer your question, Betsy, the snow and ice money was, and actually, I think the language last year was voted so it's specific that any excess there does go to the roads. And so it's for capital for highway and the road. So it can't actually go anywhere else besides to them. And then to your point, Gary, I have been asked to put together a potential recommendation to consider if the select board and finance committee wants to consider restoring any of the cuts. So that is something I do plan to work on as well.
And what about the workload? So you go into town meeting now, we don't have a town administrator. So do you get help for that, or does everybody else step up? How's this gonna go?
That's a really great question. I think it's a mixture of both. We actually had a call earlier today to talk about what are some of the priorities, or what are some of the things that are on Joe's plate that we can see if there's others that can assist with, or others we can hire, or do we use legal for some of this? Because one of the big things is procurement. The waste management contract is up in 2 months, so we have to put that out to bid. And that's, again, it's just time consuming. So, we're exploring what options might be most helpful to Joe, and then all the rest of us are just pitching in to, help out and get things moving forward.
And is that job posted at this point? Where's the status of?
No, but last night they did reconstitute the search committee, I guess is what they called it.
Yeah.
So.
We need to appoint someone from our committee.
Yeah.
I'll throw my hat in the ring for that.
Too late.
Too late? You're doing it?
I'm going to exercise my prerogative, sir. If I have no objections.
Are we talking about that right now? Are we moving?
Well,
around?
we weren't, but we sort of did.
Okay.
All right. Board member updates. Town Administrator Search Committee, I had a email from the chairwoman of the select board this morning. They're putting it together, looking for a member from this committee to be a member of that board is a requirement under the bylaw. So we need to decide who that's going to be. I would like to do it, but I'll open it up.
Yeah, I'd certainly I was talking about doing it last time when we searched for the TA. I think Gary ended up doing it. I had an interest in doing it last time. So yeah, I'm still interested in doing it, but I've got the time to do it now, and with not traveling for work. So there's an allotment of time that I could put into it. So
Are there members at large on that as well? Often there are, right?
I'm sorry?
Not this time? No?
No.
No?
I think there's, if I recall what they discussed last night, there's one individual that has municipal management experience, I believe, that's on the search committee.
Yeah, somebody from at large, yes.
Yeah.
And then there's somebody from the Board of Selectmen whose chairwoman is taking that, she said. Somebody from the school committee, and I imagine that will be Fontanella. At least that was
And then the personnel board has an individual on there as well.
personnel board has an individual on there as well. Yeah. Flip a coin.
It's not often we have people fighting to be on a committee. That's kind of cool.
Now, I've done this before. I was on the committee that hired our former town administrator, Keith. So I have a little experience with that. And Greg, if you just absolutely want to do it, okay.
I just would like to do it. It's something that, with my background, it's not really HR driven, but it's certainly management driven. And I was interested in it last time, and throw my name out there this time, but I'll leave it up to the rest of the board and let them decide who's the best candidate to do it.
Anybody else?
I was gonna throw my hat in the ring, but I'm gonna pull it back since the two of you guys are already excited about it. Figure that's
Yeah.
what I can do as a newbie back on the board.
All right. In the interest of collegiality, I recommend Greg Champney.
Second.
All in favor? Betsy, Gary,
Aye.
Alan Bell.
Aye.
What do you say, Greg?
I guess it's I. Yes.
Tyler?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Alan? Aye.
All right, well,
Okay,
thanks for being
Greg.
courageous on that, guys.
You're it.
Thank you.
I'll let them know tomorrow.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. Betsy, got anything to update us with?
The only thing I'm on this ad hoc working group with Park and Rec that they have now because of COVID. Things change every couple of weeks with Park and Rec, and I think they're doing a great job of keeping up with the state and the things that change constantly. And in terms of coming up with what they need to be doing for the town, they're going to extend. Well, it's not really an extension of Camp T. It's another program we're going to have. It's going to kind of fill in from Camp T to the middle of September as school gets delayed now to help some of the parents out with the younger kids. And there's some creative programs they're discussing for going forward with depending on what the schools come out to, if they end up with 2 days or 3 days of some additional programs they're looking at possibly doing them, which I think are creative and probably filling a need in the town.
Good. Gary?
No, my life's pretty pathetic right now. Pretty boring. Sorry.
I thought you said my wife is pretty pathetic. You said your life is pretty pathetic.
No, that's not on
Poor
camera.
Jody.
We see you living in
So
your
you stop
face.
setting me up. No, Alan, I was just thinking about when you mentioned the search committee, the liaisoning stuff that I don't know if we're reshuffling this year or all
Yep, we'll be discussing that at the next meeting. I'll have some drafts for you for the next meeting, so we'll look at that. Alan Bell.
No, I wish you well, Greg, on the search effort. Been involved when I was very involved in Cambridge for a number of years. Was involved in search committees there, the town level, and boy, that's a big time commitment. So God love you, man. Thanks for doing that. And just it's a wild world in the world of finance, and there's gloom and doom everywhere, and the market's going crazy upwards. So, what can I tell you? I don't know. Just take it a day at a time and try to do the best thing by every single person, and just try to keep going, keep straight, keep going. And I'm going to have another grandchild in November.
Good on you.
Very excited about that. So anyway, that's woo! It's
Another expense.
a great world.
Greg.
No, nothing really here. I mean, just to kind of echo what Alan's talking about. Things have been very good on the professional side, but with Gary, personally, it's been pretty darn boring. So no other updates other than that. Just enjoying the summer the best I can.
Okay. Tyler?
Yeah, I don't have much either. Right, work's crazy, but I'm cooped up as well. I am looking for a room to rent if my kids are doing school again for the fall and spring. So if anyone's got a spare room, let me know. But other than that, let me know if I can help anything, as I'm still getting involved here. I feel a little disconnected. So again, if anyone needs a hand with anything you're working on, feel free to reach out. And since I'm stuck in the house, I'm happy to spend some time.
Tom Porrell.
Well, I got recruited away from my old company and working for a new company, and going through learning going through all the orientation stuff. That's been insanely busy. And other than that, it's been boring.
Belichick hasn't called you to fill up a hole?
Not yet. I'm crossing my fingers that the ACC plays football this fall, so I can watch my Eagles. Otherwise, I'm gonna need therapy.
It's like you're already locked in a red room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Our next meeting, we've been meeting in a rotation of every second Tuesday, right, Gary? So the next meeting will be the 25th.
That one would sneak under the wire on we'd have to be voting on the warrants, right?
Well, the warrant doesn't close until September. So
Okay,
we'll be
that's right.
voting on the warrant after it closes. But the only thing that I know about is our department assignments and that sort of thing, which we can probably do without holding a meeting. But at the moment, we might want to just keep that meeting on the schedule. And if we get within a week, 4 days or so, and there's nothing on the horizon from the Board of Selectmen or any of the other departments, then we can just cancel it. But for the moment, the 25th is there. Cheryl?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just an FYI, I'll be on vacation that week, so I will not be here for the 25th.
Okay. We'll just assume the finance is working well.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay, so that's our next meeting will be right here on the 25th at 7 o'clock, unless you hear different. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
I
Seems like a winner. Thank you all very much. Good night. Have a good evening.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Good night,
Bye.
Hi, thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Kobe.